Alright, first we're going to start with our basic A5 Cyclone. Assume you've seen one of my other videos so you know how to remove the Cyclone. We'll need a screwdriver. Helps to have some O-ring pick. We'll start by removing the 4 screws at the bottom of the base plate. Kind of helps to hold on to the screwdriver. Alright, once the screws are removed, just give a quick jerk on the piston and the plate will come off. Inside you'll find the spring. You can see that there's a bent end and a curved end. It's bent all the way around. The curved end goes into the ratchet, or the axle in this case. And pull out the nut. Notice that there's a side with the brim on it, and then there's a side that doesn't. The side with the brim goes in the wider slot, usually towards the outside. Once you've got that removed, turn the Cyclone over and remove the screw at the top of the axle. Notice how the fingers go in. The Cyclone fingers there, you'll notice that the top part has a taller set of arms and the shorter. This is important to make sure you put them in the right way. Here you can push the axle through, and you have the axle, and then the other finger set, which is just a single layer. This goes on bottom. What you also notice here is that in the hole, one side is flat and the other side is curved. This will also help ensure that you get it put on in the correct positioning. From here you have basically an empty upper shell. Now the piston and ratchet assembly. Here at the base you'll see that they're held on by a retaining pin. And then the spring holder is also held on by a retaining pin. Using a pick or something, you can push those pins through. It's a little tough. And then on the other tip of the ratchet as well. Notice you have 2 different size pins on the ratchet. On the back end, on each end you have to make sure you have which one you go with. I'm sorry for the video quality, it kind of sucks. Inside here you have the spring, tension, I don't know what it's called, but there's a spring in there. This is probably the part that breaks most on a Cyclone. You want to make sure that's not broken or worn down or anything like that. Make sure you get all the springs and stuff in there, push it back down, and then take your pin and push it through to hold. This will hold the spring assembly in place. On the piston you'll have a sleeve which goes right here at the end. basically goes right there on the spring. You can check your spring for any sort of rust or anything. Inside is the piston arm itself, where you may need to oil to help get a good seal. Alright, and you just place the ratchet assembly back on the end of the piston arm, make sure the sleeve's in place, and then of course retain with the pin that we removed earlier. Check our axle for any damage or breaks. This is the tricky part. You have to pull the spring assembly aside, and then put in the axle. I like to put the axle partway through, pull the spring aside using my O-ring pick. And then get the axle the rest of the way through. Alright, we'll place that through the Cyclone shell. However, in this case, I happen to put it the wrong way up. The large part of the axle should be on the same side as the tall end of the ratchet. I know it's kind of hard to see, but alright, from here you take your short and long, or short and tall Cyclone feeders arm assemblies. Make sure you get the proper alignment, that they're going the right way. When looking from the top down into the Cyclone, the feeder arm should curve out and towards the right. Okay, when you're got everything put in there, take the screw, the one with the washer, and then just re-tighten back down. Not too tight. On the bottom, replace your nut assembly. Take your spring, and again make sure that the curved end goes towards the ratchet and the bent end goes into the shell right there. Make sure it is fully seated on both sides. Bent end into the shell and the curved end into the ratchet axle assembly. When you're putting your piston assembly on, make sure that that sleeve is pulled all the way back inside the tube and the whole thing seats down. If you don't, you'll have a hell of a time getting your plate on. Red, impossible. Alright, so we get our bottom plate back on, put in our 4 screws, and be careful not to tighten too much here. Tightening too much will actually imply excess pressure on the ratchet and axle assembly, and therefore will actually cause your feeder not to cycle properly. This can be seen when the marker will dry fire and the Cyclone will function, but not when there's paint in the Cyclone. Then everything should function properly at this point. Put your tools away and reassemble your marker.